I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for September the 24th, 2025. We are presently in the middle of the fall high holidays. Yesterday, we did not have an episode because I was at my local Messianic congregation remembering Rosh HaShanah, or the Feast of Trumpets. We're in the middle of the 10 days of awe leading up to Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement. And I'll keep you posted on episodes as we navigate around the high holidays, because there are a lot of activities, of course, going on. I also want to apologize for what took place on Monday. We had a technical error, a lockup. Just got a new webcam for our system, so hopefully we will not have any more issues. But this is the first episode with our new webcam. And of course, technical issues are just what happens in this broadcast online field. All right, so we have a very important theology roundup. As I am sure many of you, in remembering the Feast of Trumpets, yes, there is traditional Jewish liturgy, but there are also important Bible readings which take place. And many of these Bible readings involve the second coming and the resurrection of the dead. So one of the most important things which we need to be reviewing from time to time involves death expectations in the Bible, and most especially death expectations in the Tanach, or Old Testament. For many years, within our family's Messianic experience, we have noted that those on the Messianic Jewish side of the spectrum tend to adhere to more or less customary evangelical approaches to matters of death, the afterlife, and the resurrection. A believer in Yeshua dies, his or her consciousness goes to another dimension in a temporary disembodied state, and then one day, at the return of the Lord, those who have died in Yeshua will have their consciousness reunited with their resurrected bodies, and they will exist in a permanently embodied immortal condition. And indeed, that's what I believe. If you're more on the Hebrew root side, even now the one law to pronomian side, you believe that between death and resurrection, there's almost complete unconsciousness, that the human being is just entirely a physical being. There is no separation of the consciousness from the body in another dimension. And indeed, a lot of their basis comes from various statements in the Tanakh or the Old Testament, where it is frequently claimed that the Tanakh or the Old Testament knows of no such thing as a temporary disembodied afterlife. So we're going to review some of this today. If you have not already, I highly recommend you get a copy of our ministry publication, Messianics and the Afterlife. This was released as a single volume, a number of our resources from the past. Last year, this resource, Messianics and the Afterlife, thoroughly discusses the issues of the intermediate state between death and resurrection and the different dimensions of eternal punishment. It also offers some Q&A on the afterlife and a preliminary analysis on where much of the subject matter currently stands for our faith community in the 2020s. So this is a resource which I think you will greatly benefit from. Now, this is where our teaching today is taken from, so let me switch screens really quickly. And we're going to be addressing probably what is the main core of what was taught or not taught in the Tanakh or Old Testament regarding various afterlife expectations. What is Sheol? What is the grave? Within the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, the place where the deceased go is called Sheol, translated in the Septuagint by the term Hades, Hades, whose usage carries over into the Apostolic Scriptures or New Testament. In most of today's English translations of the Bible, i.e. RSV, NASB, New Revised Standard, English Standard Version, both Sheol and Hades appear in the text, leaving the reader to decide what is being spoken of. David H. Stern's Complete Jewish Bible similarly just uses Sheol. Versions like the 1984 New International Version, however, often render Sheol as the grave. With this, Ecclesiastes 9:10 would say, "For in the grave, Sheol, where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom." New International Version. Yet there is a huge debate in today's biblical scholarship whether Sheol is actually the grave, meaning just a place of internment for dead bodies. The newer 2005 Today's New International Version renders Ecclesiastes 9:10 with, "in the realm of the dead where you are going," which indicates doubt that Sheol is not necessarily the grave. So is Sheol or Hades the grave, or is it an extra-dimensional place where the consciousnesses of the deceased can be held prior to resurrection? The New Interpreter's Study Bible provides the following summary of options. So how many of you have been told that Sheol, that's where the dead in the Tanach, the Old Testament, go, and it's just the grave? How many of you are aware that there is definitely discussion in theology as to whether or not that is actually the case? I'm sure some of you all have heard this. New Interpreter Study Bible, quote, "The Hebrew term Sheol refers on one level to the depths of the earth, literally, since it was where the dead were buried. On another level, it was the dwelling place of the dead, see shades, who experienced a state of being considerably less than earthly life, but not nothingness. Sheol was not the exclusive abode of the righteous or the wicked, but of everyone, and it is often used as a synonym for death, as in Isaiah 28:15, also 1 Samuel 2:6, Job 21:13, Psalm 6:5, unquote." Now, those who believe in complete unconsciousness between death and resurrection, psychopanicists, argue that Sheol or Hades is exclusively the grave, whereas those who believe in an intermediate afterlife prior to resurrection argue that it is an extra-dimensional realm of the dead. Sheol is depicted as a place from which no one comes up, Job 7:9, seemingly requiring some kind of resurrection, causing many to conclude that it is only the grave. Some think that Sheol can mean either the netherworld or the grave, dependent on how the term is used in a passage. Yet, is it at all important that the location of Sheol is often contrasted to be as low as heaven is high? Deuteronomy 32:22, Isaiah 7:11, also Job 11:8. This could depict Sheol at one end of the cosmic spectrum, with heaven at the other end, and with planet Earth somewhere in the middle. Heaven is surely in another dimension than planet Earth. So why would it be a problem if Sheol were also in another dimension, or at least the same dimension as heaven? Expositors often do not disagree with the conclusion that Sheol and the grave are connected, as the power of death is in view. Yet, quote, "the degree to which Sheol is identified with the grave has been debated. Is Sheol a synonym for the grave, or is it a companion for the grave? So that while one's body decays in a tomb, one's consciousness is reduced to a shade of its former self in Sheol." Strong evidence is offered on both sides, with many simply concluding, quote, "at most it is a place of confinement away from the land of the living," unquote. International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. One's presuppositions relating to whether Sheol is just the grave or an extra-dimensional holding place will affect how one interprets scripture passages which portray the deceased in Sheol. One fact which can easily escape many Bible readers is how the scriptures do possess specific terms for a place of internment, a tomb or an actual gravesite. The Hebrew kever means grave or sepulcher. Brown Driver Briggs. Listen very carefully to this. When the Torah said that a person would be rendered unclean by touching a grave, a place of burial, kever, is what is referred to. Numbers 19:13 to 18. Kever was used to describe how the king of Babylon had been cast out of your tomb. Isaiah 14:19, New American Standard. And while the other kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb, Isaiah 14:18, New American Standard, the king of Babylon did not have a proper burial in a kever, instead being brought down to Sheol, Isaiah 14:9, where he was welcomed by the kings who preceded him. A common messianic passage, Isaiah 53:9, detailed how his grave, kever, was assigned with wicked men, New American Standard. In Greek, a term of specific interest to Bible readers would be menema, often meaning a memorial and hence generically grave tomb, from the BDAG lexicon. In the period between his death and resurrection, Yeshua's body was placed in a menema, Mark 16:2, Luke 8:27. Yet, as the Apostle Peter would testify, he was neither abandoned to Hades, nor did his flesh suffer decay, Psalm 16:10. Acts 2:31, New American Standard. Yeshua's body was not placed in a menema long enough to decay, while the Lord was not left as a permanent resident of Hades or Sheol. Luke 23:43, 1 Peter 3:19. While these are important examples to consider regarding what Sheol or Hades is, it behooves Bible readers more than anything else to examine the varied uses of Sheol as seen in the Tanach. This is largely because psychopanicists make their arguments about the post-mortem state almost entirely from the Tanakh. Regardless of what side one takes, interpreters are widely agreed that the usage of Hades in the apostolic scriptures concurs with the Tanakh usage of Sheol. So does the Tanakh depict Sheol as a place of internment or as a holding place for the consciousnesses of the deceased prior to resurrection? The first place Sheol appears is in the patriarch Jacob's lament for his son Joseph, of whom he cried out, "A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Genesis 37:33, New American Standard. Mourning for his lost son, Jacob was overcome, so that all he could say was, "Ki ered el beni avel sheloah," meaning, I will go down mourning and my son to Sheol. Genesis 37:35, New Jewish Publication Society version. While it would be very easy for one to simply conclude that this means, in mourning will I go down to the grave, 1984, New International Version, it is not insignificant to recognize how, believing that his son was eaten by a wild animal, Joseph would have had no place of burial. Robert A. Morey indicates in his book, Death in the Afterlife, quote, he speaks of going down to reunite with his son because it was assumed that Sheol was the place of departed spirits, probably a hollow place in the center of the earth, unquote. Similarly, commenting on this verse, Nahum M. Sarna describes in his commentary on Genesis, quote, Sheol is the most frequently used term in biblical Hebrew for the abode of the spirits of the dead. The region was imagined as situated deep beneath the earth, enclosed with gates. It was a place of unrelieved gloom and silence. It received anyone, good and bad, great and small. All were equal there, and none who entered it could leave, unquote. Also, Amos 9:2. The first biblical usage of Sheol allows for a belief in a disembodied post-mortem state, something even reflected in today's somewhat progressive Jewish theology. For the most part regarding Sheol, though, Bible readers find a series of Tanakh passages which are undeniably affected by one's presuppositions. If Sheol is just the grave, they can be viewed this way. Or, if Sheol is a holding place for the human consciousness, prior to resurrection. They can likewise be viewed this way. The following are a selection of passages to be considered. Thankfully, most Bibles do leave Sheol as is, leaving the reader to decide what is being communicated. For Sheol cannot thank you, death cannot praise you. Those who go down to the pit cannot hope for your faithfulness. It is the living who give thanks to you, as I do today. A father tells his sons about your faithfulness. Isaiah 38, 18 and 19, New American Standard. The strong among the mighty ones shall speak of him and his helpers from the midst of Sheol. They have gone down, they lie still, the uncircumcised slain by the sword. Ezekiel 32:21, New American Standard. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol where you are going. Ecclesiastes 9:10, New American Standard. For there is no mention of you in death, in Sheol, who will give you thanks. I am weary with my sighing. Every night I make my bed swim. I dissolve my couch with my tears. Psalm 6, 5 and 6, New American Standard. Let me not be put to shame, O Lord, for I call upon you. Let the wicked be put to shame. Let them be silent in Sheol. Psalm 31:17, New American Standard. As sheep they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. And their form shall be for Sheol to consume, so that they have no habitation. But God will redeem my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me, Selah. Psalm 49, 14 and 15, New American Standard. Let death come deceitfully upon them. Let them go down alive to Sheol, or the realm of the dead, today's New International Version. For evil is in their dwelling in their midst. Psalm 55:15, New American Standard. For your loving kindness toward me is great, and you have delivered my soul from the depths of Sheol. Psalm 86:13, New American Standard. For my soul has had enough troubles, and my life is drawn near to Sheol. I am reckoned among those who go down to the pit. I have become like a man without strength, forsaken among the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more, and they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the lowest pit, in dark places, in the depths. Psalm 88, 3 through 6, New American Standard. What man can live and not see death? Can he deliver his soul from the power of Sheol? Selah. Psalm 89:48, New American Standard. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay hold of me. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, and the light around me will be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to you. Psalm 139, 7 through 12, New American Standard. And finally, our last passage here. If I looked for Sheol as my home, I make my bed in the darkness. If I call to the pit, you are my father, to the worm, my mother and my sister. Where now is my hope? And who regards my hope? Will it go down with me to Sheol? Shall we together go down into the dust? Job 17, 13 through 16, New American Standard. Okay, from the variety of usages seen here, it is not difficult to see how some interpreters can view Sheol as being the grave, and yet how other interpreters can see Sheol as a shadowy netherworld for the deceased, where there is a quasi-existence of being cut off from earthly experiences. Psychopanicists would view the varied references to Sheol in a poetic or non-literal sense, whereas those who believe in an intermediate post-mortem state would view Sheol as a literal holding place for the consciousness of the deceased. Both psychopanicus and those who believe in an intermediate post-mortem state are agreed that earthly life is contrasted with the existence of the deceased. But what kind of existence for the deceased is implied in the sorts of passages above? Bruce Milne indicates in his book, The Message of Heaven and Hell, that while, quote, its etymology is disputed, many scholars favor a root meaning such as the desolate realm or the unworld, unquote. Sheol and the grave are undoubtedly partners, but to what extent? In Death and the Afterlife, Morey summarizes some thoughts which need to be kept in mind. Quote, once in Sheol, all experiences related exclusively to physical life are no longer possible. Those in Sheol do not marry and procreate children because they do not have bodies. Neither do they plan and execute business transactions. Once in Sheol, they cannot attend public worship in the temple and give sacrifices or praise. There are no bodily pleasures such as eating or drinking. Those in Sheol do not have any wisdom or knowledge about what is happening in the land of the living. They are cut off from the living. They have entered a new dimension of reality with its own kind of existence, unquote. If Sheol is portrayed as a quiet place of relative inactivity, but from where there can be a degree of conscious interaction among its inhabitants, then it need not be viewed as the grave. When living people prefer to rest today, they like to be in quiet or serene places. In the case of Sheol, it is portrayed more as a place where the deceased are left alone more than anything else. In the view of Peter C. Craigie in his Psalms commentary, quote, in Sheol, persons were believed to exist in a form of semi-life, at rest, yet not in joy, for they had not the fullness of life which made possible the richness of relationship with the living God. Death was thus to be dreaded, unquote. Even in spite of a level of consciousness, the shades in Sheol could not experience all of the things which earthly life offered. Okay, now advocates of psychopanicky, or more popularly known as soul sleep, like Samuel Bacchiocchi. You may be familiar with his name from the book. It was called From Sabbath to Sunday. He was a Seventh-day Adventist theologian. Advocates of psychopanicky like Bacchiocchi, however, do believe that Sheol is just another term for grave. In Immortality or Resurrection, he provides numbers 1631 to 33 as his support, saying, quote, perhaps the clearest example of the location of Sheol beneath the earth is the account of the punishment of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, who had revolted against the authority of Moses, unquote. These verses detail As he finished speaking all these words, the ground that was under them split open, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and their households, and all the men who belonged to Korah with their possessions. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive to Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. Numbers 16:31 to 33, New American Standard. This was quite a dramatic scene, as those opposed to God's servant were swallowed up by the ground. Bacchiocchi's view in Immortality or Resurrection is that, quote, this episode clearly shows that the whole person and not just the soul goes down to Sheol, to the realm of the dead, unquote. What he has failed to state, though, is the fact that being swallowed up by the ground is not the normal way which people die. Number 1630 is clear to specify how this judgment was something unheard of. the New Jewish Publication Society version, or unprecedented Holman Christian Standard Bible, so that Moses' credibility could be confirmed to the Israelites. There is no major issue here if an Israelite had already believed that the consciousness of the deceased went to Sheol because the rebels going down with their possessions would make the Israelites realize that what had made them prideful against Moses could not help them in the face of God. On the contrary, the psalmist even says that one's bones have been scattered at the mouth of Sheol. Psalm 141:7, New American Standard, supporting the view of Sheol not being the grave, but instead of a holding area for the consciousnesses of the deceased where the physical elements are not allowed. The rebels opposing Moses would then be swallowed up and killed, ultimately ending up as just Rephaim, or shades, in Sheol. Those who believe that the evidence points to Sheol being a temporary holding place for the disembodied deceased until resurrection can point to usages of the term which can be read from the perspective of an extra-dimensional post-mortem vantage point. Morey provides a list of 20 reasons in his book Death in the Afterlife, pointing to Sheol being an extra-dimensional netherworld, notably including, unlike a grave, Exodus 14:11, Sheol is never localized. Sheol can never be bought or sold, Genesis 23:4-20, unlike a place of entombment. Humans can place a dead body in a resting place, but not in Sheol, Genesis 50:13. Humans can touch a grave site, Numbers 19:19, but not Sheol. Remains in a grave can be removed or uncovered, 2 Kings 23:16, but humans are incapable of removing or uncovering anything in Sheol. Humans can beautify or decorate a grave site, Genesis 35:20, but not Sheol. These factors have frequently led many Bible readers to the conclusion of how Sheol is an extra-dimensional netherworld. As Morey further concludes, quote, Sheol is under the earth or the underworld, while graves were built as sepulchres above the earth, or caves or holes in the earth. Sheol is called the underworld in Isaiah 14:9. It is also called the lower parts of the earth, King James Version, in Psalm 63:9, Isaiah 44:23, Ezekiel 26:20, 31:14, 16:18, 32:18, 24. Sheol is the opposite of heaven, Psalm 139:8. One must go down to get to Sheol, Genesis 37:35, unquote. While the linguistic debates over what Sheol is do rage on, there are some specific instances where death is portrayed in the Tanakh, which should give examiners a fuller picture of the subject, because as John Cooper notes in his book, Body, Soul, and Life Everlasting, we can often be stuck with, quote, the indeterminacy of poetic language, unquote. It is incumbent upon Bible readers to see what the Tanakh actually details about the death expectations of ancient Israel to have a fuller picture. And this is where we're going to conclude our study today. But I hopefully have given you just enough information to whet your appetite involving, yes, the dead as portrayed in the Tanakh. They go to Sheol, but is Sheol, is it just the grave, or is it possibly some kind of a netherworld, so to speak? This is something which certainly Jewish interpreters, Jewish commentators have had to sort through. So let me switch windows back. Yeah, so this is taken from our study, Messianics and the Afterlife. And indeed, we go through a lot of passages in both the Tanakh and apostolic writings, which affect what one believes about the intermediate state between death and the resurrection. All right, so this concludes our theology roundup. Now we're going to be moving over to some news. And so far, our new webcam is working. That is so comforting, because it was really quite upsetting to me when it froze last time. All right, now we do the news roundup after the theology roundup, because of course the news is something which is time sensitive and everything changes from day to day. I didn't have as much time yesterday to look into news because of course I was engaged with Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets activities. I did post a McKee moment from Monday evening, Tuesday morning, and then Tuesday afternoon after I got home. But there was some very important news which took place. Now, before we get into that, let's just remember three things. Number one, please be praying for peace, Israel, Gaza, the release of the hostages, peace in the Middle East. Number two, peace between Russia and Ukraine. And then, of course, number three, reason and sanity here on the American home front. Now, everyone's Messianic congregation or synagogue is different. Your experiences were doubtlessly different than mine, but I didn't hear that many references other than a reference to Charlie Kirk during Kaddish to what was going on out there in the world yesterday. But right now, the big news is, of course, the UN General Assembly in New York and all of these countries recognizing an independent state of Palestine on Rosh Hashanah, no less. That's why the Israeli delegation was not there for a lot of this. Not a peep at my congregation from the leadership. Now, of course, everyone's situation is different. There are plenty of people in the Messianic community who are talking about this, but the next year is going to be very, very interesting as it concerns not only the geopolitical situation, but also the Messianic situation. Okay. And our family is now entering into our fourth decade. It wasn't until the fall high holidays of 1996 that we were fully involved in the Messianic community, but we are noting the time. And I am looking back on the past and I'm sorting through a lot of the experiences we've had. And I'm trying to discern what our future in the Messianic community actually is, because I think we do have an important voice people need to find out about. All right, so all the news stories I'm going to be going through, we don't have as many as we normally do, but these are things which I passively encountered on social media. The links will be available for you to look at later today when this episode is archived at MessianicApologetics.net. Okay, so here's the first story. This is forwarding on from the White House, President Trump's speech before the United Nations. So here's just a brief summary from Eric Dougherty. At the United Nations, President Trump, I'm not going to go through the whole list, called for protections for Christians, said Europe must stop adopting Sharia law, harshly criticized globalism, slammed the UN for its climate alarmism, scorched countries for funding Russia's war, said the UN doesn't back up its words with any meaningful action on issues that matter, preached American exceptionalism and said none of their countries come close. And then finally, the last one, I didn't go through everything, concluded by urging UN members to protect their national identities by clamping down on mass migration and serving their people. Okay, so we know, and I've said this before, and I'm not the only one, leaders like President Trump are a major pain in the you-know-what to globalism, to the New World Order. And if this second Trump term is able to do a lot of the things it set out to do, it is possible that the end time scenario with some kind of a one world government, some kind of a one world economy, one world religion, all this, it is possible that this could be delayed by a generation. It might be the last big push before the final generation, but it's possible. We don't know right now to the degree that that's going to happen. If these things are not deterred, expect the next few years to be very hot, and expect no dreams to come true. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, so here's something which came across my Instagram feed from Stand With Us. this is important to keep in mind here. As Israel, of course, the state of Israel is constantly being attacked. It's a settler country, colonizers, Zionists, whatever the accusations are. But here, as Israel prepares to mark the beginning of the new Jewish year, 5786, one of the most popular names of 5785 was, in the state of Israel, Mohammed, a beautiful reflection of the country's rich diversity, where coexistence is a daily reality. Okay, so yes, the most common male name in the state of Israel, of course, is not the only place where Muhammad is the most common male name, but it's Muhammad. And that indicates that there's a large Muslim community in the state of Israel, not in the West Bank, not in the Gaza Strip, in Israel, the state of Israel proper, where they are permitted to practice their religion freely. And we don't often, in some of the rhetoric which is out there against Israel, especially the past 2 years since October the 7th, 2023, we don't see this kind of a reality promoted enough. All right, this is not the only source which is repeating this, but this is the first one which came across my feed. From the New York Post yesterday, September the 23rd, Google announced Tuesday that it was going to reinstate YouTube accounts banned for posting then controversial content related to the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a letter its attorneys sent to a House panel. And the actual headline is Google to reinstate YouTube accounts banned for repeated violations of COVID-19 content. Now, our ministry, our family did not say that much about COVID-19, the pandemic, what to do or what not to do when things hit in 2020 and into 2021. We did say, look, you need to wash your hands more. We did say you probably need to do some, house cleaning and sanitization more, right? And as certain treatments come out, we don't encourage you to just go out and take them because everyone else is doing. You can wait a little bit. But ultimately, this is what we would classify as an elective surgery. And if there are any problems with it at all, we serve an all-powerful God who will see that you are protected and that you are healed. So, even though I'm aware of all the things people said about, the jab and everything else, I didn't get into a lot of that. We just pray that, the Lord is able to preserve his people. But yes, definitely that you need to wash your hands more. You need to stay cleaner. And if you need to stay home, then stay home. And we know that a lot of good, in spite of the bad, actually came from the pandemic. But it was also true that it was a test run, probably for a lot of the things we are to anticipate in the future. But we know that for our purposes as a Messianic ministry, most Messianic people, they're going to go to YouTube as their main source of, in this case, finding a Messianic insider. They're also going to go to now probably a source like X. Some of the other sources, not so much. So yeah, we have to be very careful with what we say even now, and keep the discussion with open source information, with materials everyone can find pretty easily, which have been largely vetted. And even with that, there's a lot of things that we can talk about with current events. So we don't have to go into the alt-right or the alt-left so that far. Okay, from the Department of State, this is from yesterday, September the 23rd. Secretary of State Marco Rubio: there is no Palestinian state, and the only time there will ever be one is if there is a negotiation with Israel, which right now is impossible because they have a war going on with Hamas. The only leader in the world really that can broker that or bring that together is President Trump. Okay, that's Marco Rubio's opinion. And a lot of people, in seeing that, may draw the conclusion, well, if Trump is the only one who can sort through what's happening in the Middle East and this huge mess that we see, Israel, Gaza, all these other things which are now, coming to some kind of a point, perhaps, maybe he's the beast. Or maybe the person who comes after him will be the beast. Of course, we don't know. But what we do know is that it is a very difficult to solve situation. And that as believers, we have a responsibility to pray for peace. We have a responsibility to pray that all parties involved, both Jew and Arab, have a dynamic salvation experience with the living Yeshua. That is what we have to pray for. Okay, this is kind of interesting. It's a few days old, from September the 24th. It's from Israel Hayom on Instagram. But here, Greta Thunberg has been removed from the executive committee of the Samud flotilla to Gaza amid internal conflicts and delays. The flotilla, which aims to break the Israeli blockade, has faced a number of issues, including technical malfunctions and extended delays, like the weather. Thunberg was moved to another ship, and her name was removed from the official website's management list. She will continue as a regular participant, stating her strong belief in the mission's humanitarian goal. So, I think this is kind of funny. So, Greta Thunberg, of course, started out her career, as it were, as a activist, a protester, was all about climate change, global warming. Then she got involved in protesting the war in Gaza, being involved in the flotilla. Now she's been removed from the main leadership of the flotilla. I guess a lot of people don't like her that much. Yeah, she's not a very likable human being. I just think that that's funny. Okay, our next story, because right now we do know that there is all the functions taking place up in New York at the UN General Assembly. From open source Intel Defender, this is yesterday, September the 23rd. U.S. President Donald J. Trump was asked just now if he thinks NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft that violate their airspace, to which he responds, "Yes, I do." Trump was then asked if he still trusts Russian President Vladimir Putin, answering, "I'll let you know in about a month from now." Okay, so this has been a situation. I mean, if we get to 2026, it will have been 4 years since this conflict between Russia and Ukraine started. And Trump saying that, yeah, NATO should shoot down any Russian planes which enter into its airspace, and we'll see where things stand in about a month. All right, we're just going to briefly report on this. This is from Open Source Intel Updates. Breaking: French President Emmanuel Macron presented photographic evidence to a U.S. court to prove that his wife, Brigitte Macron, is a woman. Okay. Right. We know that there's a certain influencer out there who is facing a major lawsuit about this whole issue. I mean, when you make claims about someone, be sure you have the evidence to back it up. I mean, you can say that the Macrons are an interesting or even a strange couple. I even think the Trumps are a strange couple, to be honest with you. But that is a far cry from some of the accusations, false accusations, which have been leveled against the French president's wife. Okay, also from Open Source Intel Defender, this is from yesterday, 2:12 p.m., forwarding on a post that President Trump posted to his Truth Social platform. You can read this in full later on, but the commentary is, wow, in a post just now on Truth Social, U.S. President Donald J. Trump says that after getting to know and understand the military and economic situation between Ukraine and Russia and the economic trouble being imposed on Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Okay, so we know that Trump has tried to have diplomatic discussions with Russia. There was the big summit, of course, in Alaska between President Trump, President Putin. We had very high hopes, and then President Putin returned home. And then there was the summit at the White House a few days later with Zelensky and everyone from NATO and Europe. And Putin started a major offensive against Ukrainian civilians. So here, this is like, we've got the ability with Ukraine and NATO to take back what Russia has taken away from Ukraine. I mean, that's showing you how close we possibly are to not only an elongated conflict, but to this conflict getting heated up a little bit. So yeah, this is very, very concerning. Okay, this is from Visegrad 24 yesterday, September the 23rd. Pavel Gubarev, the former governor of the Donetsk People's Republic, I probably mispronounced that, says Russia is losing the war. Okay, on many sections of the front, we're attacking while the enemy is defending. Because of this, we are suffering incomparably heavy losses. Ukraine's military is completely satisfied with the current situation and doesn't particularly need any peace. Considering their effective strikes against our oil refineries, with 26% of our production destroyed, the situation is strategically beneficial for them. And then the comments conclude with, the current situation is already tantamount to defeat for us. Russia doesn't have the capability to complete the special military operation. All right. Now, we do know, of course, opinions vary from time to time. And this is something which can change based on the situation on the ground. But here you have someone who is claiming that Russia's not going to be able to do it. So the question is, and this is what we as believers have to pray for, is it possible for there to be an honorable peace? And this is also where some of the people I know who are Ukrainian, who are Russian, or they're from the former Soviet Union, because they look back at the history of the Russian Empire, the czars, they look at the history of the Soviet Union, and they look at the Russian Federation post-fall of the Soviet Union. They see a tradition of leaders who have generally been paranoid. They're always concerned about who's going to get them, who's going to overthrow them, who's going to depose them. And is Putin doing what he's doing in order to be the tough guy because he knows that he could be taken out by somebody in his inner circle, someone in the Russian military, etc. This is just theory. I mean, we don't know. But for someone to say Russia has lost and they know it, and I mean, we'll wait and see. We know this is the kind of thing which can change based on someone else's opinion. Okay, let's totally change the subject. Here's one. This is actually from NPR, but I did think it was interesting. From 3 days ago, a Texas biotech company says scientists have made an important advance toward bringing the dodo bird back from extinction. Okay, so we've heard about, woolly mammoths possibly being brought back. We've heard about different, tall birds being brought back from extinction with genetic engineering and cloning. Of course, the joke is, well, did we learn anything from Jurassic Park? But even I've said, I would understand if the dodo, really small bird, not huge bird, if scientists wanted to bring that back, because there is at least some relatively recent, in the past several hundred years, scientific information. Yes, these birds existed, then they were, they died off. And there are, I was at the British Museum in 2008. I remember seeing, was it the British? It may have been the Museum of Natural History. But anyway, I remember seeing a stuffed dodo. And yeah, this is something that I would think would be far more logical to revive, as it were. But of course, it'd be through genetic experimentation, cloning, all of this kind of stuff. Okay, we got 4 more stories. Open source Intel Defender. Of course, this is the kind of thing which happens all the time because Russia, as we know, just conducted some war exercises. Nuclear strike exercises are currently underway in France. This is from yesterday, September the 23rd, with at least 5 Airbus A330 multi-role tanker transports currently up over the country alongside E-3F Sentry airborne early warning and control aircraft and an untold number of Dassault Rafale BS with France's strategic air forces. The operation, dubbed Operation Poker, is carried out at various intensities and times throughout the year, consisting, and then it goes through these kinds of things. So yeah, this is typical, but one of the things you do need to be aware of and remember, Who has the nuclear weapons in NATO? The United Kingdom, France, and the United States. That's what you need to remember. So as this conflict, Russia-Ukraine, could get larger, France has got to be up on their game with their nuclear arsenal, among some of the other members. So that's what you're seeing there. All right, here's a very important clip which has been circulating around social media since yesterday afternoon. I hope you've also seen it. This is from the UN General Assembly. That is the president of Indonesia, okay? Prabowo Subianto. Hope I pronounced that properly. And he said in his speech before the UN, we can only have peace when we recognize, respect, and guarantee the security of Israel. And what makes this so important? Indonesia, home to the world's largest Muslim population of over 250 million, has a leader who speaks with greater clarity than Israeli or American leaders. Truly remarkable. And this is from the X channel, Hashem, so that's their commentary, but it's true. Indonesia has the world's largest Muslim population. It's not in Saudi Arabia. It's not in Pakistan. It's Indonesia, which is an Asian country. And maybe it's because Indonesia is so far from the Middle East that they have a perspective on what's taking place in the Middle East, which is different than those in the Middle East, right? So as the world's largest Muslim country and as a major economic player in the world, hopefully what the president of Indonesia said, who is a Muslim, obviously, can be taken to serious heart and can help reduce tensions and deflate potential problems. Okay, two more stories. Here we have one from Visegrad 24 today, September the 24th. Zelensky says he's ready to meet Putin on neutral ground. And there are a number of countries which have been proposed. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Austria, Switzerland, or even a country like Kazakhstan. Okay. Look, we do pray for peace, but we'll wait and see what happens, right? And then another one from the UN General Assembly, and this has got a clip associated with it. Iran welcomes the defensive pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Iran President Masoud Peshkian tells the UN General Assembly, points it as a beginning of a comprehensive regional security system. Okay, so are we going to see the formation of an Arab Islamic NATO, something which the Iranians, of course, having just suffered through the 12-day war, would doubtlessly welcome? We'll wait and see. The Lord is in control. The 10 days of awe are an important time for all of us to be pressing into the Lord, both individually and corporately. And while I do not ask, and while I do not expect people in today's Messianic congregations and synagogues to, have 15 minutes, 20 minutes of just news, something akin to what we're doing here on Messianic Insider, at least take 2 to 3 minutes and mention something big every Shabbat that people can really be focusing in on, because we live in a time which is getting darker and darker, and a lot of us, a couple weeks ago, we were just really hit hard by the Charlie Kirk assassination, whether you liked him or not. There are many things which are going to be affecting millions of people, particularly as it involves, here in America, our First Amendment right to free speech. We either use it or we lose it. And in the next year, we're going to start seeing a lot of changes take place with the Messianic community, its future, the Middle East. Is Trump going to be able to succeed in slowing down the New World Order or not? And we have to be on top of our game with matters of the kingdom. And we need to be fulfilling the tasks and assignments the Lord has for us with the resources he has given us for as long as we can. I absolutely believe that. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and support for all of our ministry efforts. If you have not, please do go to my website, messianicapologetics.net. There you can access a wide number of free articles, frequently asked questions entries, back issues of Outreach Israel News. You can check out some of the back episodes of Messianic Insider, different McKee moment shorts, and you can look into our different adventures over the years. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.